what about people who are using alcohol dysfunctionally, people who are drinking more than the recommended units per week, but they don't identify themselves as being an alcoholic? This is where grey area drinking comes in, because I would say most people don't sit at that end of the scale. And I think it's really helpful to consider a scale in this example of talking about grey area drinking. So perhaps we have a scale of 1 to 10. And 1 is someone who doesn't drink at all, or maybe they have a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year, and that's their alcohol use. And 10 is what we've just described as the severe alcohol use disorder, someone who needs to have medical assistance to withdraw from alcohol, because we have to remember that alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from withdrawal from. So we've got a 1 and a 10. But most people don't fit in that scale, like a 1 or a 10. Most people don't need to have medical assistance to withdraw from alcohol, but nor do they never drink. And so grey area drinking, I would say, is about a 5 to an 8 on that scale, maybe a 4 to an 8.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Sleep Like a Boss podcast. And I have a special guest today, Sarah Rusbatch. And Sarah is a certified women's health and well-being coach and an accredited gray area drinking coach. And you might not have heard of what that is, but we will dive into that in a minute, because today we're going to talk about alcohol, women and alcohol specifically. We're going to talk a little bit about sleep, but also about everything that goes on with alcohol, how we sometimes use it, how that might not be a good thing, and how we can, I think, improve our health, improve our sleep, improve ourselves if we address that, if we understand it and then address it if necessary. So, Sarah, thank you so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. And maybe we just start off with what is gray area drinking. A lot of us might not have heard of it. I hadn't before I stumbled across your profile, actually.
Yeah. So up until recently, the conversation around alcohol has been you're either a social drinker or you're an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the medical world, they don't use the term alcoholic anymore. They use the term alcohol use disorder, and you are mild, moderate, or severe, because it's a scale. But if we go back to the previous way we would have talked about this, alcoholic or a social drinker, most of us consider someone who's an alcoholic to be someone who drinks every day, someone who drinks in the morning, someone who wakes up with trembling hands and needs to have a drink to get through their day. Perhaps they've lost their job, they've lost their home, they've lost their relationship, they've lost their driving license. And we really see someone with that severe alcoholism as someone who is, end stage of that use of alcohol. But what about people who are using alcohol dysfunctionally, people who are drinking more than the recommended units per week, but they don't identify themselves as being an alcoholic? This is where grey area drinking comes in, because I would say most people don't sit at that end of the scale. And I think it's really helpful to consider a scale in this example of talking about grey area drinking. So perhaps we have a scale of 1 to 10. And 1 is someone who doesn't drink at all, or maybe they have a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year, and that's their alcohol use. And 10 is what we've just described as the severe alcohol use disorder, someone who needs to have medical assistance to withdraw from alcohol, because we have to remember that alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from withdrawal from. So we've got a 1 and a 10. But most people don't fit in that scale, like a 1 or a 10. Most people don't need to have medical assistance to withdraw from alcohol, but nor do they never drink. And so grey area drinking, I would say, is about a 5 to an 8 on that scale, maybe a 4 to an 8. So we've got past the point of being a take it or leave it drinker. We've got past the point of just, I don't really care whether I have a drink or not, to, oh my God, I've had such a stressful day. I'm so stressed. My husband's driving me nuts. My kids are driving me nuts. I need to have a drink. And when we've got to that point where alcohol is featuring very prominently in our toolbox of how we get through life, then we're starting to rely on it in a different way than, oh, I'm out for dinner with friends, I might just have a glass of wine, or I might not, I don't care. Does that make sense?
Yes. So it's more of, it becomes a, yeah, like you said, it becomes a tool, it becomes a coping mechanism, right? If I need it to de-stress, numb, socialize, maybe even, like some people might have anxiety and drink, right? Like it could be
Totally.
it could be all kinds of different ones. Okay. And why is this your passion? How did this start?
Yeah. So I was a classic grey area drinker. So
Okay.
I didn't define myself as an alcoholic. I drank a lot. I was a big binge drinker. So, and that's the other thing with grey area drinking. Some grey area drinkers, they use alcohol every night, and they might have 1 to 2 glasses, sometimes more, but sometimes it is just 1 or 2, but they actually can't get through the night without having that 1 or 2. Or you have people that don't drink every day, but when they do drink, they really binge drink. And once they start, they find it really hard to stop. So they might be like, oh, I'm only going to have 2 drinks tonight. And then after 2 drinks, all care goes out the window. They're leaving the car, they're ordering another drink, they're in for the night. And then they've got to navigate. Like for me, it was always waking up the next morning, had got an Uber home, the car was on the other side of the city. I had to get back to get the car. I had to get the kids to sport. It was just always, it started to impact my life. So I'd always been a big drinker. I grew up in the north of England, where we started drinking at 14. Alcohol was very prevalent in my life. It was, this was in the 90s, when it was, Sex in the City was huge. We all had our inner Samantha that we were channeling, drinking cocktails in rooftop bars, going, oh, we can have it all. Women can do it all. And I was part of a generation of women that were working. We were earning our own money. We were drinking, and we felt that we were the epitome of sophistication because we had the money to go and drink these champagne cocktails and everything. And at no point did I think my drinking was a problem. I drank a lot. I was living in London at this point. But I drank like everyone else around me, as any young single woman in her 20s. Then I met my husband. We got married. We eventually had a baby and decided to move to Australia. And that was when things started to change for me, because if we've ever used alcohol as a coping mechanism for anything, the brain remembers that. The brain goes, when you feel that way and then you drink alcohol, it makes that feeling go away. So you must drink alcohol. So I was in a situation where I fell pregnant with my daughter very quickly after having my son. And this meant that very quickly I was living in Australia with 2 kids under 2, with no family support whatsoever, no long-term friendships. I was trying to make new friends. I was terribly homesick. I was very lonely. I was very confused about my identity and who I was, because I'd gone from having this high-flying career in London where I was doing, wonderful restaurants every weekend, wining and dining clients, and all of a sudden I was at home with 2 kids under 2, changing nappies, pureeing carrots, cleaning up baby sick, and going to monkey music. And I'd lost who I was. I loved being a mum, but it was such a difficult stage to navigate. And I think it is for any woman. But then you throw in being on the other side of the world from all of your support network, being really homesick, being really lonely. And my husband, bless him, love him to bits, but not particularly emotionally illiterate, and not very good at going, oh, hon, you look like you're having a really hard time. Shall we sit down and talk about it? Like that. It's not in my husband's vocabulary. So I very much felt like I was on my own. And that was when my brain was like, but we know what we do to feel good, Sarah. We turn to alcohol. And for me, that was when my drinking turned from being something that I did to socialize to being something that I did to make those horrible feelings go away, because they're not nice feelings to sit with. And so alcohol then for me became much, much more of a crutch, something I was doing at home on my own, something that I was looking forward to more and more, simply to escape myself. And that was when it became more problematic for me.
Okay. And how would you describe then, because the scale from like 2 to 9 kind of is, or even 4 to 8, like you described it, is quite wide, right? How would I assess myself from what you've said, what gray area drinking is, or when is it becoming a problem potentially?
So some of the signs that you're a gray area drinker. So number one, you always drink more than you intend to. So, I'm just going to have one or two, but it always ends up being more than that. Number two, you find yourself thinking and planning when you're going to be drinking again. Like for me, it would start, earlier in the day. Oh, I'll be all right when I can get that drink. Or, oh, I'm not going to drink tonight because I know I'm going out tomorrow. And so I want to be really fresh for tomorrow because I'm going to be having quite a few drinks tomorrow night when I go on that girls' night out. So the thought of my alcohol use was taking up headspace quite a lot. Number three, it was something that I was making rules around my drinking. So I think people who don't have a problem with alcohol don't make rules around their drinking. They kind of have a drink or they don't. Whereas for me, it was like, okay, I'm not allowed to drink on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't drink before 5 o'clock. I don't drink white wine on an empty stomach. I don't drink at lunchtime unless I'm out of the house with my girlfriends having a lunch. I don't drink alone. I always have to be with someone. And so I was making these rules, but then I was always finding a reason to break them. So it was like, oh, I know it's Wednesday and I know I said I wouldn't drink, but I've had a really hard day. I really deserve to have a drink. And if I just have one tonight, then I won't have one tomorrow night. So therefore I can justify having one tonight. And it was just this internal chatter that was constantly going on around alcohol. Some of the other signs would be, we notice that it's starting to impact us negatively, but we can't stop. So for me, the ways it was really impacting me were, number one, my sleep, which obviously we'll come on to, but every time I drank, I was waking up at 2 a.m. And I'll explain later on, I'm sure we'll get into this as to why this happens. Now, there's nothing worse than waking up at 2 a.m. That it's a lonely time to be lying there tossing and turning, but not just can you not sleep, but you're also really cross with yourself and you're kind of going, oh, you shouldn't have had those drinks. You said you weren't going to drink so much last night. Why do you always do this? You always do this. You said you were going to have one and you finished off the bottle. And just to be lay there in those dark hours on your own, just hating on yourself and being so negative about yourself. And so my solution to that was not to not drink, Annika. My solution to that was to take a sleeping tablet so that I didn't wake up at 2 a.m. So you can imagine how I felt having had the best part of a bottle of wine and a sleeping tablet, and then getting up and dealing with young kids in the morning. So the solution to me was not to not drink. And whereas to people that are not gray area drinkers, they would go, oh, alcohol's really impacting my sleep now. I need to just cut back. I need to stop drinking. I'm in my 40s. It's really impacting me. It's time to stop. But gray area drinkers are like, oh, no, that's not an option for me. What else can I do in order to bypass this 2 a.m., 3 a.m. wake up? It's astonishing how many people I've shared that story with who go, me too. I was doing the sleeping tablet thing as well. I was also riddled with anxiety. So I'd never been an anxious person before. I'd gone to my GP. I said to her, I'm so anxious. I'm overthinking everything. I'm like a shell of myself. And at no point did she ask me, how much are you drinking? And yet happily wrote me a script for anti-anxiety meds, which I now know, if I'd taken them, should never have been mixed with alcohol.
Exactly. Like the cocktails or
totally. Yeah. And then the final sign might be, on the outside, no one thinks you've got a problem. And this is the thing with gray area drinkers. Most of us tend to surround ourselves with other gray area drinkers. And so if you're drinking the same as everyone around you, you're like, well, everyone drinks like this, so therefore it's not a problem. But you're inside, you're starting to question, am I drinking too much? I think I'm drinking too much. Those thoughts start to come, but you're trying to shove them down because you don't want to think about it. So those are just some of the signs that we're falling into that grey area drinking category. And if any of your listeners want to know more, there's quite a comprehensive information about this on my website under the grey area drinking page.
Awesome. And we'll link to that and we'll talk about that at the end. We'll definitely link to everything in the show notes. So if I'm surrounding myself, I'm just going to jump to that question now because it just comes to mind. So if I'm surrounding myself with a lot of these people and I kind of want to, I'm noticing things are going like the wrong direction, then it is super hard to get out of that because you're being like, I'm just thinking in my 30s, every time we went out and somebody wasn't drinking and they were female, the first question was, oh, are you pregnant? Because that was always the, like, oh, she's not drinking, but she used to drink before. Which in your 40s or 50s is probably not the question anymore for most people, but that is really hard. Like, how do you do that?
It's really hard. And it's one of the, I've coached thousands of women now to either remove alcohol or change their relationship with alcohol. And one of the biggest blocks to this is your social group, because if you've surrounded yourself with people who drink in the way that you do, and then you decide, I don't want to drink like that anymore, it's really hard, because that might be that you realize that might be all that you've had in common with those people. It might be that you realize that they're not supportive. I had people say to me, and not because they were being mean, but because this was how our mindset was at the time. And to be fair, I probably would have said the same thing to someone else if I was still drinking. But I had people say, oh, let's catch up when you're drinking again, because that was how we socialized. Okay. We socialized with alcohol. And so it was kind of like, well, we wouldn't socialize and not drink. So therefore, we'll just catch up when you're drinking again. And so that raises so many questions, because it's not just, if we decide that we want to change our drinking, it's not just about the alcohol. It actually leads to a massive change in so many areas of our lives.
Wow. Can we talk a little bit about sleep? Sleep and alcohol. I have a lot of people that I hear from, women particularly, this kids are in bed, husband's busy at night, or is also in bed, and I need that glass of red wine to just relax from the day, and it actually helps me fall asleep better.
Yeah, so the myth about alcohol is that it helps us to sleep better. It doesn't. It helps us to fall asleep, because alcohol is a depressant, but then there is so much that happens in our brain after we've consumed alcohol that actually it goes on to impact our sleep, so that we will never, ever have a decent night's sleep, even if we've just had one glass of wine. So there's a couple of ways that alcohol impacts sleep. So number one, when we drink alcohol, we release a neurotransmitter called GABA. GABA helps us to feel calm. It helps us to feel relaxed. And that's what can be the sedative effect that helps us to fall asleep. The problem with our beautiful brain is that our brain wants homeostasis. It wants all of our neurotransmitters to be at exactly the right level, in balance with each other. And when we get a big surge of GABA after we've had alcohol, it tips the balance. We've now gone into this real kind of calm, relaxed, depressant state. And there's too much GABA, and the brain is like, we don't want too much of that, because now we're out of balance. So the brain actually releases cortisol, the stress hormone, to bring back the balance that has been caused by having too much GABA. Once the alcohol effects have worn off, we are left with excess cortisol being released through our body, which is what will then cause us to wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., or will mean that we have a really fitful sleep and we don't go into that solid, restorative, beautiful sleep that humans need to have. So that's one of the ways that alcohol impacts sleep. And just on that, they've done tests now that show people who drink, not a huge amount, but people who drink regularly, maybe a couple of glasses of wine 3 or 4 nights a week, have a higher baseline of cortisol in their body than people who don't drink at all. So what this means is, when you've got more cortisol in your body, you feel more stressed and you feel more anxious. People who drink alcohol make themselves more stressed and anxious by drinking alcohol, and yet the irony is most of them are drinking because they're stressed and anxious, and the short-term effect of alcohol, the short term is to calm us, but the long term is to make us more stressed and anxious. So it's a vicious cycle. And when I work with my clients, something they notice very, very quickly when they remove alcohol is how much their anxiety reduces simply from removing alcohol. We don't realize we're making ourselves stressed and anxious by consuming alcohol. The second way that alcohol impacts our sleep is we go through sleep cycles that include obviously deep sleep and REM sleep. And you all know better than I do. I think we have 5 to 7 sleep cycles a night. Would that be about average? When we drink alcohol, we bypass the REM cycle of sleep. And the REM cycle is really, really important for brain health, for preventing dementia, diabetes, obesity, all of those things. And some studies say that if you drink even just 1 or 2 glasses of wine, you will reduce from having 6 to 7 cycles of REM sleep to only 1 to 2. And our human brain is not designed to only have 1 to 2 cycles of REM sleep. It's designed to have the 6 to 7 cycles that the brain needs in order to do its job while we're sleeping, because so many things have to happen in the brain while we're asleep. So we're actually disrupting our sleep so much without even realizing it. Sedation is not sleep.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have to remember. If we sedate ourselves with alcohol or sleeping tablets, we're not actually getting restorative sleep, which the brain needs in order to do all the functions and jobs that it has to do to keep us well and operating optimally, that can only happen when we're asleep. And so my message to the people I work with, and I do a lot of corporate talks, is not you must never drink alcohol, because I know for some people that's not their goal, but it is on the nights you can take it or leave it. It is always better to leave it, simply because of the impact it will have on your sleep.
Yes, thank you for going into detail on that. And I was looking at a study that I found that I thought was impressive, and that was for women, more than 1 drink a night, more than just 1 drink a night, can decrease your sleep quality by up to 39.2%. Like that is and that correlates exactly with what you just were saying about the sleep stages. That is insane. And if we think about that, REM sleep also helps with emotional regulation. And we're already somebody who maybe struggles with anxiety. That will be higher from what you described with the alcohol and the effects of GABA and that cortisol surge. Plus, we didn't have that emotional regulation because we didn't get enough REM sleep. We're going to be more anxious the next day. Then we need to caffeinate because we're tired. And then we're going to do more alcohol to kind of counter. Like, it's just a vicious cycle. And then comes the unfortunate, I don't want to say disadvantage, maybe it is for women, that we are just not as great at dealing with alcohol as men are, right?
Yeah, so women just cannot metabolize alcohol in the same way as men. And there's physiological reasons for this. Number one, we have less water in our body and more body fat, because a woman is designed to have more body fat so that she can carry babies. So a man's body has more water than a woman's. Because he has more water, it means that he dilutes the alcohol more than a woman does. So immediately, for a man and a woman having the same amount of alcohol, a woman will experience the effects of alcohol quicker. Number two, women produce less of a key enzyme called ALDH, alcohol dehydrogenase. We have less of it. It's just a fact. And this is an enzyme that breaks down alcohol and metabolizes it out of the body. Because we have less of it, more alcohol enters a woman's bloodstream than a man's. And this makes women more vulnerable to the health risks associated with alcohol. So women are more vulnerable to cancer, to liver disease, to heart disease, to stroke. Women become addicted to alcohol quicker than men do. So it's really, and the other thing to know is women have less of this enzyme ALDH. And once we start getting into our late 30s and early 40s and going through perimenopause, that enzyme actually reduces even more. At the same time, a woman's liver starts shrinking in volume from her late 30s onwards. So as a lot of your listeners may find that, once I got into my 40s, the hangovers got worse, the alcohol was affecting me different, my anxiety increased, alcohol was affecting my sleep more. And that is because as we age, we don't metabolize alcohol as effectively as we did in our 20s. And this is, but the unfortunate thing is, for most women, is their 40s and 50s, I find, is when they're leaning on alcohol the most, because they're the most stressed and anxious, because they might be raising kids, and we all know what it's like raising teenagers, particularly teenage girls. I'm going through it myself at the moment. We might have aging parents, we're working, we're carrying the lion's share of the work that we do in the home as well. We've got pressure to look good, to be a good friend, to be a good wife, to be porn stars in the bedroom, to be Nigella in the kitchen, to be, Huffington in the boardroom, where the expectation and the pressure on women is so incredibly high. And we use alcohol to switch off and to escape. And because in the short term, it just makes it all go away. And that's what we want in that instant moment.
So if that is something that's happening to somebody, like they might identify with what you're saying and they're like, oh, I do this. I get these cravings kind of for the drink. What are like your top 3 tips for people, women specifically, to address this?
Yeah, so the first thing is, I guess, to acknowledge what's causing the craving. Because most people that come to me, they're like, oh, I'm drinking too much. I need to stop drinking so much. It's not good for me. And I'm like, yeah, but for most women, the alcohol is a solution to a problem, right? They think alcohol's the problem, but alcohol's not the problem. Alcohol's the solution to the problem. So we have to look at what's the problem. So if it's that you're really stressed because you're juggling way too much, we need to step back and just look at that a little bit. And we need to start looking at what can we add in that's going to soothe you and calm you and regulate your nervous system so that you don't end every day at 5 o'clock so stressed, so anxious that all you've got in your toolkit is to press the F-it button and open the fridge and pour a glass of wine. And so I work with women to regulate their stress and to start looking at what are the stress that we can find. I work with them to look at what are we adding in to help us to feel good so that we don't need the alcohol anymore. And in most cases, it's morning sunlight. It's those practices of connecting to ourselves, whether it's journaling or meditation, going for a morning walk. It's exercise, because actually our brain only works optimally if we are exercising regularly. It's creating connection with other women who are on that same path as you, because if all your friends are still drinking, it can feel incredibly lonely to be the one removing alcohol. So I create communities for women to have a safe place to come and connect with other like-minded women. But the first place to start is simply to reflect, why do I use alcohol? When I have that urge for alcohol, what's actually driving that? And just simply acknowledge, I'm really stressed, my kids are driving me nuts, and my immediate thought is, have a glass of wine. And it's not that thought is not wrong. That's something that it's a neural pathway that has worked for us for a really long time. It's just that as we get older, it stops working because our body just simply cannot metabolize alcohol in the way it did when we were younger.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for those tips. I know you have been working on a book that I think really touches on a lot of the things that we talked about and gives probably a lot more tips for people to address this topic. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so I wrote a book. This book is called Beyond Booze: How to Create a Happier Life Alcohol-Free. And the reason I worked on this book and wrote this book was because there's a lot of books in the sober world about how to get sober, like 30 days to remove alcohol. And there's a lot of books that are memoirs and people's journeys of removing alcohol, but there aren't any books about how to stay sober. So actually, what does it take to create a life where you don't have the physical urges for alcohol anymore, and where you've created a life that you love, so you don't actually want to escape it anymore. So I've got a community of 15,000 women, and I asked the question, why do you drink? Or why did you drink? And there were 3 answers, Annika, 3 only: boredom, stress, and loneliness. So if we've got a generation, and I don't know if this is, if your listeners are listening to this and maybe you're thinking, wow, I reckon, I really resonate with boredom and loneliness, or I really resonate with stress and loneliness, or whatever. But those are the 3 answers that I get time and time and time again. And my book goes into detail in how do we address this? How do we create a life so that we're not so bored, so stressed, so lonely? Because what I find is most women, they're so tired because they're doing so much that it gets to the end of the day and all plans to go and, I want to go and do a yoga class, or I want to go and join that walking group, or I want to do all of those things. And it gets to the end of the day and it's like, I'm so tired, and the wine is just there and it's an easy switch off. And so that's what they're doing. So I help them to start considering, well, how could it work for you? How could we make some changes so that you've got more energy And I've got a whole section in the book on the physical side of reducing cravings for alcohol. I talk about sleep, I talk about sugar, I talk about nutrition, the importance of sunlight, the importance of exercise, and all of those factors. So it's a book really that's just jam-packed with all the tools and all the skills that I've developed and then coached, because I've now coached thousands of women, and I've seen what works, and everything that works is in that book.
Awesome. And that is coming out, right?
Yeah, so it comes out in early February in the US and Canada. It's available for pre-order now. You can go onto my website or go onto Amazon, and anyone who pre-orders it now will get 5 free coaching videos from me, on all focused on how to navigate stress without alcohol, how to navigate the festive season and socializing if you want to drink less or you don't want to be drinking, and how to create a life you love so that you don't need to turn to alcohol every day.
Awesome. And if people wanted to work with you and find out more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I will be running, every year I run an alcohol-free challenge, which starts on the 8th of January. And I have women from America, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. Those are the 5 countries. But as well as other countries, but those are the majority of the women come from those countries. And it's 30 days of support, education, tools, resources to actually change your neural pathways and actually change your mindset around alcohol. Because it's very common to do dry January. It's very, very common. And you can do dry January and you can cross the days off your calendar and then come to the 1st of February, go to the pub, get pissed, and then nothing's changed. Or you can do this challenge with me. You come into a group with like-minded women, with other women from all over the world who are doing it as well. And every day you get a video from me, a live talk where I'm showing up and we're talking about how to navigate your relationship. If your partner's still drinking and you're taking this break, how to navigate friendships, how to manage your stress, how to deal with cravings, and everything like that. So that's available now. For your listeners, if they would like to join me, it's in US dollars. It's about $75 for the 30 days of support. And I highly recommend doing it. I have, through this program, supported thousands to successfully change their relationship with alcohol.
Wow. And it's even, so even if I'm somebody who wants to reduce my drinking, it doesn't have to be completely dry forever, but even just change your relationship with alcohol, being able to react and understand and respond to cravings, urges, assess the situation, like all that kind of, great. Awesome.
Yeah, it's not about saying you must never drink again, but it is about saying commit to 30 days.
Yeah.
The learnings that you will get, you'll never forget. They'll stay with you forever, and they will really support you long term. And lots of people, I've been sober now for coming up to 5 years, and lots of people say to me, but what are the benefits? Because I was a massive drinker and a massive party girl, and my whole identity was focused on Sarah the party girl, Sarah that always had champagne in her fridge whenever anyone popped by. That was who I was. And so what are the benefits that I've experienced of removing alcohol? Well, the first thing for me was better sleep. Like, oh my goodness, it was the first time in years that I was getting 8 to 9 hours of solid restorative sleep every night. And what that allows you to do in your life and how that enables you to feel like never ever. I would say that sleep is the most underrated life hack out there. When you sleep well, your emotional well-being is everything is better. I don't self-sabotage. I don't eat crap food. The way that I talk to myself in my head is so much more positive. I have more energy. I exercise. I hit my goals, and that builds my sense of pride and self-achievement. And so, getting that better sleep has been incredible. And then the knock-on effect of that is that you start showing up as the mum you want to be, as the wife you want to be. You start hitting goals at work. You start dreaming bigger and going, oh, well, maybe I can go for that promotion. Maybe I could run a marathon. Maybe I could set up that business. Maybe I could go trekking in Peru. Like your world becomes bigger because you're not just constantly in this little box of going, oh, when am I drinking again? And then recovering from drinking, and then recovering and then drinking, and then recovering and then drinking. And life is so small when you're trapped in that cycle, and it just starts to get bigger and bigger when you remove it.
Yes, that is such a great That is such a great description. And I think that really also resonates with people who really generally struggle with sleeping and from alcohol and being not, because it is exactly that. You're trapped in this tiny cage and you're limiting yourself because there's just not, the foundation isn't there. And if it's something that is, for anyone who's listening, if alcohol is part of that story for you, really, really go and check out Sarah's resources. They are fantastic. She's done the work on herself, right? You've been through it. You've helped so many women go through it. And yeah, I think you're just such a great resource. And thank you so much for what you do for the women out there. I think this is so needed. We're going to put all the links where people can find you in the show notes, but if they just wanted to give you a follow or just check you out, is it your website? Is it Instagram? Where is it best to find you?
So I'm very present on Instagram. I share lots and lots of free content on there. So head to Instagram, head to my website, and there's a free guide on there that you can download, which is just a free guide to taking a break from alcohol. You'll also be able to see a link to pre-order the book. So you get those 5 free coaching videos, and also to sign up to my January alcohol-free challenge.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was great. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you again shortly.
Thank you.